starting off talking about Team USA's win over Brazil yesterday in what was maybe their most dominant game so far. From start to finish, it was pretty much all Team USA in this one. They end up winning 122-87, and it was a little bit refreshing for Team USA, and they have been, once the official group stage kicked off, it has been, much cleaner for the United States, but this was sort of their best, I thought at least, beginning to finish victory. Team USA and Steve Kerr went back to their original starting lineup that they opened the games with. Devin Booker, Drew Holiday, LeBron James, Steph Curry, and Joel Embiid. And this was easily, I thought, the best that we have seen Joel Embiid look up to this point, where he came out red hot from the beginning of this game. I thought that when you look at how Embiid is able to fit in with this team, understanding that he isn't going to have the ball in his hands to create maybe quite as much, but I thought he played into the flow of Team USA's offense a lot better, in large part because of the fact that he had the three-point shot behind him, was 3 for 3 from the three-point line in this game to help contribute to his 14 points on the game as a whole. But definitely a positive for Embiid, who has been sort of picked on a little bit in terms of not being a great fit with the roster, and this was kind of the prototypical game of what you were expecting from him. 7 rebounds, I believe that is the highest mark that he has in the Olympics so far. Feel free to fact check me in the comment section if I'm mistaken there, but it looked like the energy on defense and on the glass as well was sort of at a high from Embiid. So, I myself have been a little bit critical of Embiid as well. So I did want to at least give him some credit in this game, because I thought it was easily the best that he's looked in the Olympics so far. And I also wanted to give some love to Devin Booker, who ended up being the leading scorer for this game. He has been so consistent for Team USA throughout this entire run, and I feel like he's been getting sort of swept under the rug a little bit, because it's not like he does anything necessarily spectacular on the defensive side, the playmaking side, the rebounding side. He just sort of does his assignments, and he knocks down the shots that are asked of him. And this was a very well-rounded performance from Team USA, but I did want to give some love to Devin Booker, who was 5 of 7 from 3 in this game, en route to him scoring 18. And I think that especially the debate mostly was around Devin Booker versus Jaylen Brown, because Jaylen Brown, they play a very similar role, I would say, the two of them. Devin Booker a little bit more of a ball handler playmaker than Jaylen Brown, but that's not necessarily something Team USA needed from Devin Booker, considering they already have plenty of ball handlers on this team. Jaylen Brown, who just won Finals MVP, and obviously as we were coming into these games, it was a little bit controversial that he was left off of the roster, and you can point to Derek White, who ended up being the replacement for Kawhi Leonard when Kawhi was asked to leave the team. But I do think that Derek White and Jaylen Brown would have very different roles on Team USA, and I stand by Team USA deciding to take a player that's a little bit more of a glue guy, doesn't have to do quite as much with the ball in his hands, and I just loved the fit of Derek White on this roster. Devin Booker was sort of the roster spot, maybe that or Halliburton, but again, I would say that Halliburton and Brown are different enough play styles that the clear comparison was Booker and Jaylen Brown. And Jaylen Brown can impact the game, I think, more on the defensive side of the ball, so that was one of the main sort of talking points when comparing Devin Booker and Jaylen Brown and who would help benefit the U.S. more. But Devin Booker is more than capable. I feel like NBA fans have sort of swung in the opposite direction of Devin Booker as of these past couple years. And I don't think that that's totally fair. Obviously, the Suns roster situation has been a little bit messy, and people hold that against Booker. I don't think that's entirely fair. And I just wanted to give Booker credit for shining the way that he did in this game. And I think that the last sort of thing, because you can go down the stat sheet and talk about all of the individual games, this was really more so just about the collective team, and they looked really, really, at a heightened level. And I think that one thing that's really clear with Team USA right now, and we knew this headed into the Olympics, of course, but especially as we enter these last couple rounds here, is the difference with the United States on the glass and in the paint in comparison to their opposition. And it's just so clear with the not just top end talent of a Joel Embiid or Anthony Davis or Bam, who all individually have been incredible, but the combination of all of them as well, and the fact that, it was a little bit of an interesting fit when Steve Kerr sort of really leaned into the double big lineup of Bam and Anthony Davis off of the bench, but it has worked really well up to this point, and it's just something that is clearly the biggest possible advantage between the U.S. and every other country. And we're going to dive into some of the other quarterfinals games from Tuesday afternoon. France winning is sort of why, the U.S. is going to have to keep there because of the fact that France is really the only other team that can match up from a size perspective with the U.S. So again, we'll dive into that game in the next segment. But in this game, the United States just absolutely dominating the paint. And because of the fact that there is just such a clear advantage for the U.S. there, and the overall talent discrepancy as well, other teams are just sort of resulting to, they're going to have to let the three ball fly and hope that they hit these shots, where I think the U.S. has been outshot from a volume perspective at the three-point line in every one of these games, but obviously skill becomes a very big part of that. And we did see Brazil yesterday fire up 37 threes, but the U.S., despite shooting less, still hit on more of those opportunities. And that's just kind of the way that it's going to have to go with Brazil and with any other team that is trying to rival the United States, understanding that there is such a large talent discrepancy that you're going to have to rely on that three-point shot. And I don't really know if there are any other teams that can necessarily have that and the post presence. Now, again, I don't want to look too far ahead on France here, so I'll sort of wrap things up on the USA conversation. Sure, yesterday you did see Bruno Caboclo actually have a big outing for himself with 30 points in this game. Was definitely, a little bit of a surprise there. Bruno Caboclo, if I'm not mistaken, he was the one who, for a number of years when he was with Toronto, this idea that he had all of the tools and he just had to piece it all together. That never really came to fruition in the NBA, but, give Caboclo some credit for the job that he did in this game. Was pretty impressive there. Also, Huertas would be the other one where I was texting with a friend of mine, and he was maybe more aware of Huertas than I was. He made his NBA debut at 32 years old in 2015, and he's still playing basketball. The jump shot, even though it is maybe a little bit funny looking, was pretty automatic. And he was having, at this point, starting, I think they announced on the broadcast that he was 41, 42 years old, starting for Team Brazil in this outing, and ultimately was a productive player. There was really nobody who was going to save Brazil based off of how yesterday went down, but did want to show some love for them as well. But U.S. is now moving on. They will be facing off in the semifinals against Serbia. That's another example of, and Serbia, maybe not quite as talented from the overall, I would say, NBA talent for sure. They do have some types of shooters, obviously Bogdanovic being the most notable one, but that's kind of the team where if Serbia had shooters around Nikola Jokic, that sort of would be the team that would be built to defeat the United States, but that just isn't really the case right now. The U.S. has been able to pretty convincingly beat Serbia in their first couple of matchups against them, especially so in the group stage, the first game of official Olympic play, where the U.S. won by over 20 points. So I think that they are in a very good position here, but I kept alluding to it throughout this segment here. Clearly, I'm itching a little bit to dive into it, but France does pose a very interesting threat for the United States because of the fact that they do have Rudy Gobert and Victor Wembanyama. Gobert, though, dealing with an injury that actually limited him to just 3 minutes yesterday, and they have a pretty tough opponent in their own right to surpass Germany to even get to that point. So I want to dive into what the medal games could look like in the overall picture outside of the United States. But before we do so, we have to take a quick break. So we will be right back. Do not go anywhere, and we will be right back.